Lorwyn. Chapter 10. Rhys could feel Colfanor's presence in Kinsbaille, looming over the village like a fragrance of burning leaves. Rhys ignored it. In fact, he tried to ignore everything as he entered the town. The curious Kifkin onlookers, the serious-faced sentries, the occasional greetings, even the members of his own party. Bridget, Aisling, and Marilyn silently accompanied him through the Kinsbaille gates and on to the town centre. The fairy trio had flitted off somewhere, capering and chatting. Rhys stopped outside Sen Teague's large wooden door. He waited for Aisling and Bridget to catch up, and then he said, "Your mission ends here, if I'm not mistaken. I thank you both for your trouble." "My job is to escort you to Colfanor," Aisling said. "And I report to the Sen," Bridget added. "I will speak privately with Colfanor," Rhys said, "or not at all." "Of course, Ter, but I intend to see my duties fully discharged." "And compensated," Bridget said with a smile. "Eh, Flamekin?" "Aye," Aisling said, but she was looking at Marilyn when she said it. Clearly the pilgrim still had questions about the spirit Rhys and the stranger had encountered in the forest. Rhys called out. "Marilyn," he said, "I have been honored to escort you. You will be safe here. The Mornsong tribe is far away, but you can easily send word to them up the river." "Thank you, Ter," Marilyn said, "but I trust this is not the last time I will see you." "That I cannot say," Rhys replied, "though I can offer a bit of practical advice. If you travel from here, choose your conveyance and your company wisely. There is something strange in the air." He thought about adding a warning not to mention she'd travelled with an eye-blight, but found the words wouldn't form on his lips. He cursed his own cowardice. Marilyn bowed. Rhys nodded and turned back to the Sen's door. Before he could knock or announce himself, the painted wood swung open, and Gaddock Teague stood beaming in the doorway. "Excellent," the ruddy-faced Kifkin said. His eyes danced over Rhys. "You have arrived, and well before our self-imposed deadline." "Mind your manners, Kifkin," Rhys replied. "My pardon, Ter. Hail to you, Dane Rhys of the Hemlock Giltleaf Hunting Pack. You honor us with your presence." "I am here to see Colfanor." "By all means, your mentor awaits you inside. May I accompany you to my office?" "You may." Rhys glanced back at Bridget and Aisling. "You may also dismiss these two excellent retainers with congratulations on a job well done." Of course. Archer Bailey, your special duty has concluded. And you, Flamekin, please wait here. I shall settle our account once I have shown my noble guest in." Teague's face clouded as he noticed Marilyn. "And who is this? A lady of the blessed? On behalf of all of Kinsbaille, great lady, let me welcome you. It is an honor that we do not deserve." "Thank you, your honor," Marilyn replied with a moderately respectful nod. Teague waited for an awkward moment. When he spoke, his voice was impatient and nervous. Splendid. Shall we away to your mentor, then?" With haste. Rhys turned to his party and said, "Goodbye to all of you. If we meet again, I shall greet you kindly." After the briefest and curtest of bows, he dismissed them, steeled himself, and followed Teague inside. The building's interior was deserted and dark. Rhys stepped lightly across the wooden floor, and stood rigidly outside the closed door of Teague's interior office. Colfanor was on the other side. He could feel the old log's thoughts like a cold wind, inscrutable, but undeniably present. When the Sen made as if to open the door for him, Rhys flashed him an angry glare. "Excuse me," Teague said, sweating slightly. "I will leave you two alone and see to the Flamekin's fee." Mopping his brow, he bowed low and backed away from Rhys until his ample posterior bumped up against the far wall. Rhys waited until he heard the outer door open and shut. He stood relishing this last moment of solitude. He knocked on the Sen's door, and Culfinor's deep, stentorian voice boomed out in reply. "Come in, my child." Rhys opened the door and entered. The Sen's office was even gloomier than the rest of the building, its thick wooden shutters completely blocking out the morning sun. In the darkness, Rhys saw Culfinor hunched over Teague's broad-topped desk, the yew's upper branches scraping gently against the ceiling. The ancient tree simply stared at Rhys without the slightest hint of a recognizable expression on his broad, column-like face. Of all of Lorwyn's diverse denizens, treefolk were the least like elves, and of all the treefolk, the rare and deadly yew were the strangest of all. Fairies, Kifkin, giants, and even Merrow shared the same basic bipedal design, though only the elves realized its full potential for grace and beauty. In contrast, Culfinor was, well, a tree, and like trees would have, he appeared out of place within the cavernous office. He had limbs like an elf, that is, strong, rigid bowls for arms that ended in surprisingly dexterous branching wooden fingers, and thick root-like legs, but the trunk that made up most of the treefolk's body was also crowned by hundreds of boughs and branches that had no analogue on the bodies of elves or Kifkin. The ancient yew was glorious in his crimson-tinged needles, and his gnarled bark skin was pure, perfect brown. He moved slowly, eyes, lips, and fingers almost glacial in their progress. But Culfinor had long ago proven that what he had to say was worth waiting for, and if he raised a mossy brow at something Rhys said, it was in Rhys's best interest to wait for his mentor's reaction before saying anything else. If he had seen through the glamour, Culfinor had not yet reacted to Rhys's injury. The great tree simply stood and stared and mused as his broad, rough lips pursed and unpursed. "You have called me, Culfinor," Rhys said at last, "and I have answered." The red yew chuckled, but his face remained stern. "For the first time in months," he said, "most students would apologize to their masters for diligence, such as this. Most students would call me master when addressing me under such circumstances." "I am not most students." "No, you are not even the student I expected." He raised a woody finger and pointed at Rhys's forehead. "What happened to you, my child?" "That is why I came," Rhys said. Culfinor had seen through the glamour without apparent effort, and Rhys's words poured out in a strange rush of relief and anxiety. "I was in a battle. I was in danger. We were all the boggarts. They're different. Organized mobs eating the flesh of... Never mind. The point is, I felt a powerful surge of something. Magic. You magic. Poison magic like nothing I've ever seen. When I awoke, the enemy and my pack had been utterly destroyed." He swallowed hard. "And I, too, am destroyed. I am an eye-blight, Culfinor. I am of no use any more. Whatever you had in mind, you should find another student who will not cast shame upon you." "So," Culfinor said, "you came not because I called, but because you were in a crisis. A crisis of your own making." "What does it matter, old log? You called and I came. I needed you and you were here. We've both gotten what we wanted." "Not yet, my student. I have a special favor to ask." Culfinor settled back against the wall in a symphony of creaking wood. One that I could not rely on you to hear except with your own ears. I have been busy bearing my share of the toil on behalf of the nation. Consider the rewards of such toil, Colfonor said, with a careless wave at Rhys's forehead. Seek you answers here, or absolution? I seek the meaning of it all. Rhys threw back his head and met Colfonor's cold, appraising eye, fully aware that his broken, blackened horns stood exposed before his mentor's studied attention. I am no longer fit to call myself one of the blessed, Rhys gestured to his horns. And so I must know, Colfonor. Did you set this in motion? Did you bring this about? I've never seen anything like what happened, let alone cause such death and destruction. Colfonor sniffed. His melodious voice dripped with outrage. I had gathered from your own account, he said, that you did it to yourself, unless that was the mewling of a self-pitying child. Rhys scowled at the old you's attempt to chide him into a better state of mind. Yes, it was me. I can feel it. So tell me this. Did you know I was capable of such a thing? Did you withhold that information from me, knowing that I would one day destroy my future with the guilt leaf, and have no choice but to follow your teachings? Colfonor's eyes blazed. He was slow to anger, but once his temper reached a boil it remained searing hot for days. I would never have allowed you into the situation that would cost you your horns, and you insult me with the insinuation. I want you to choose to obey me because your heart and your mind are so inclined. The option I offer is superior to all others. I have no need to hobble your other options in the race to win your devotion. His voice came strong and sharp, stabbing into Rhys's brain like a blade. I have never harmed you, Rhys, not by any action or inaction, and I have never delighted when you have come to harm. Rhys unclenched his teeth. He bowed, his legs trembling, his voice choking against the unbidden lump forming in his throat. By the infernal bogs, he was so tired. Thank you, Colfonor, he said. The sage closed his eyes. So we'll have no more baseless accusations, and you will honor the request I have yet to make. I will listen, Colfonor. If it is within my power, I will consider it. Colfonor opened his eyes. The great yew sighed, his branches and needles rustling. Finally, Rhys added, Master. That's more like it, Colfonor said. His broad face softened. The future, Rhys, is more important than the past. The petty squabbles between master and pupil should not transcend the values of wisdom we exchange. You do not know it yet, but you are the last of my students. I will take no more apprentices. If you do not do the thing that I ask, if my past does not help create my future, all of the oldest you teachings will wither away, as if they had never been. Are you ill? Injured? Rhys felt his face twist in confusion and concern, his own injuries immediately forgotten. Surely you're not so old that... I have important business here in Kinsbaille, Colfonor said, and though I pulled up my roots long ago, I am not free to move around the countryside as I wish. There is a chance that I will never again see the murmuring bosque, never anchor myself to the sacred soil that nurtured me. I cannot risk losing all that I am, all that I have been. I cannot risk leaving this world without passing along my knowledge. The yew's eyes warmed, and a smile turned up at the corners of his mouth. And for once that is not a veiled aspersion of your value as a student. There is only one way for a sage to ensure his teachings survive him, and that way is impossible for anyone but the sage himself. Then how am I to help? You will by the means, Kolfanor said. I will provide the method. The old yew grinned widely and triumphantly. I must ask you to put aside the ways of the hunter and become the gardener I always wanted you to be. Rhys bristled. I am not suggesting you commit to the life of a seed guide, not permanently, but you must understand, no one but me knows yew lore better than you do. You are the only one who can do this for me, and once it is done, you need never do it again. And before I expound you to consider, let me hold forth for a moment. You've endured my lectures in the past, but this is more important than scholarship. I wish to apologize to you, Rhys. Rhys choked on confusion and was momentarily unable to answer. I diverted you from the path you wanted, as well as the one you were meant to walk. No, you were not meant to be a hunter, but a seed guide, my boy. The oak shepherd on the council was keenly interested in you being his shepherd for his sapling warriors. You would have been a great mentor to the next generation of oaks, my pupil, but I would not allow that. As much as the oaks needed you, I needed you more. Now, as when we met, I am the oldest of my kind. I was very old then, and I am older today, older by far. Long ago I received the whole of my tribe's arcane lore and wisdom, magic and traditional rites from ancient days. Before I die, it is my responsibility to pass that on. My own memories and experiences must join with those of my ancestors. We must endure. Rhys spoke quietly, his voice low and strained. He had known Kolfanor for most of his life, and he could sense the red yew wasn't being entirely honest with him. So that was the whole of your interest in me? To make me a vessel for your knowledge? Only in part. You proved ill-suited to that particular discipline. You showed only the slightest regard for the honor I had bestowed in choosing you. There were times you seemed to regard it as a burden rather than a boon. I could see you only ever wanted to be a hunter, and you proved it when I gave you the most powerful poison spells in all of Lorwyn, the deepest foundations of yew magic, and you bent them to a hunter's needs. In your hands, the subtle, indirect influence of the seed guide was fashioned into a focused, lethal offensive tool. Only a strong mind and stronger will could change the fundamental nature of our ancient lore. Only an elf could take a blade of grass and use it as a weapon. That quality in you, the unyielding stubbornness of character that seeks to make the world conform to its own desires, to me, that was an acceptable alternative to true spiritual dedication. I taught you all I could, knowing that you would only ever use it for the benefit of the elves. But I did not begrudge you for it. When you declared your intent to leave and return to the Gilt-Leaf, I did not argue. Of course you did. Kolfanor scowled, his wooden skin creaking loudly. I may have expressed my disappointment, which was heartfelt and genuine, but I did not argue to exhaustion a point which had already conceded. I let you go. I let you choose your own path. Now I must ask you to step off of that path for a time, a short time, and unalterably, the last. Rhys bowed his head, showing Kolfanor his horns. That path is closed to me. Your injury changes nothing. If you were the perfect king of the entire elf nation, I would still ask this of you. I chose you all those years ago because you have many gifts, Rhys. You were always possessed of a great deal of potential, and a will strong enough to develop it. All I am asking is that you hearken back to our time together, to the secret wisdom we shared. Be my pupil one last time. Have I earned at least that much consideration from a blessed hunter?" Before Rhys could reply, Culfnor plunged his hands deep into the tangle of branches atop his own head. The yew rummaged around, his face screwed up in concentration, until he latched onto something deep in the middle of his crown. He gently withdrew his cupped hand and extended it to Rhys. The elf stepped forward. Culfnor opened his hand to reveal a compact, segmented wooden cone, freshly plucked. The seed body filled Rhys's cupped hands. This would sprout the next generation of yew sage, the offspring of the great solitary Culfnor, possessed of all his knowledge and unburdened by his long lifetime of habits, opinions, and quirks. Already the cone's casing had cracked, revealing tantalizing slivers of green within. "This is ready to sprout," Rhys said. "You see," Culfnor beamed, "it's already coming back to you. I taught you so well, I must say." The yew's smile faded. "Take this to the sacred grove," Culfnor said. "To the place you and I spent so much time together. The Murmuring Bosque. Ah, such happy times, eh, my boy?" "Happy," Rhys agreed, half mesmerized by the seed cone. Between liberal dashes of abuse and condemnation, he looked up at the old yew, and they both shared a quick, almost inadvertent smile. "Why?" Rhys asked. "Why me? Why now?" Culfnor gestured impatiently. "And still you question me? Go now," he said. "Plant this tree in my name in the sacred soil that nourished me. Follow the rites and rituals I drummed into your head for 10 years. Do that and return, and I will answer any question you ask, if I am able. In the meantime," Culfnor's upper branches rustled and scratched the ceiling, "accept this final gift from your old mentor. Who knows how dangerous your pride can be?" The ancient yew's needles shifted from red to yellow to green. Rhys felt the familiar touch of glamour settling over his head. He felt the protest forming in his throat, but as he had done with Marilyn, Rhys choked it back down. "I accept your gift." Rhys bowed his head and then stood tall. "But Culf, Master, what do I do about—" "Go, my pupil." Culfnor's needles faded back to a dull, dusty red. The old yew sagged and slumped against the wall behind him. "I have much to do. Your questions tire me. Do this thing for me, or do not, if your deep love and respect for me as your mentor does not prompt you to accept. Perhaps the common law of the marketplace will. I gave you strong magic. In return, I ask you for this favor. Settle this debt, my former student, and we will be quit of each other." Rhys paused. "Go, you contrary little shrub. The longer you tarry here, the less likely it is you'll succeed." Rhys bowed. "As you wish, Master." He straightened and said, "But when I return I will commune, and I will understand how the use of your magic destroyed everything I held dear. I will do this for you, Culfnor, but then you will do as I ask." "Agreed." Culfnor settled deeper into Sen Teague's creaking wall. "When you return, I will help you to make sense of it all." "If you can." "To the best of my ability. Now hurry," Culfnor said. "Each grain in the hourglass that falls brings strange and unforeseen dangers a step closer. Farewell, Master. We will meet again." "Farewell, my pupil." Rhys cradled the seed cone between his hands, bowed to Culfnor, and then left the darkened room without another word. Nath stood in the center of his command tent with his sword clenched tight in both hands. The weapon was heavy, but he hefted it easily, holding it before him with his arms extended. The wide, single-edged blade, almost a cutlass, gleamed in the light. He'd recovered his weapon from the battlefield not long after he had found Griffith impaled in the boughs of a tree. After an hour of attention, the weapon had gleamed, with a day's worth of caked bloodstains wiped away. He examined the blade's razor edge and planned his next move. The disgraced elf's continued existence was an ongoing insult to the entire elf nation, and to Nath himself. Hiring the giants was enough to warrant Rhys's ouster alone, perhaps his permanent banishment. But Rhys's wholesale slaughter of his fellow elves by the use of damnable and uncontrolled treefolk magic demanded the ultimate punishment. It seemed the outlaw had fled to Kinsbaille, which enabled Nath to pursue two of his immediate goals at once. Kinsbaille had value all of its own, but with Rhys there, it was too valuable a target to overlook. Already the few survivors of the Gilt-Leaf packs along with fresh recruits were dismantling the camp and preparing to march. Nath had sent for additional forces, and as soon as they arrived he would lead the packs to Kinsbaille. He would have Rhys's head on a pike before the next day's end. And then he would have a long talk with Sen Teague about Kinsbaille's future service to the blessed nation of the Gilt-Leaf. If Teague protested, Nath would take great pleasure in beheading the Kifkin toad with his new sword. Nath lowered his blade and took cold comfort in another fact. Rhys's potential role in the elf nation was moot, and his preferred status no longer applied. Not even the oldest and most respected treefolk could save the former Dane from the nation's vengeance. Griffith appeared outside of Nath's tent. "The vine herd are ready to review tear," Griffith said, "and the cuff hounds are howling to be let loose." Nath's eyes darkened. "You are keeping them separate, of course." "Of course, Tear. Also, the warriors you sent for have arrived. I wasn't quite sure what to make of them. The vine bread, I mean." "They aren't damaged, are they?" Nath rose angrily, slinging his armored chestplate over his torso. "They're unblemished and ready to fight?" "Yes, Tear. They're in excellent shape. In fact, they're... "What are they?"
"They're magnificent," Griffith said. "The most perfect I've ever seen. All proud and noble elves. I am honored to serve alongside them, Tear, but..."
"But what?"
Griffith lowered his eyes. "They put the vine bread we cobbled together to shame, Tear."
"There is no shame in adapting to terrain when on the hunt, Griffith."
"No, Tear. We've been enchanting whatever low creatures we could find. The vine bread you sent for might well be insulted if we field them alongside such rabble."
"The honor of serving me directly will counterbalance any shame they might experience," Nath said. "Is that all you came to say, Griffith?"
"No, Tear."
Griffith looked miserable, frightened and anxious at the words he was preparing to say.
Some of them, the elves that you sent for, even some of the vine bread, they aren't just hunters, Tear. They carry fearsome weapons. They have the air of serious, dangerous men. I believe that there are winnowers among them."
"There are," Nath said, "because I sent for them." Griffith shifted uncomfortably. Nath said, "It's time for you and I to have a serious talk about your future."
Griffith hesitated. The fear left his eyes and his voice was clear and strong. "I agree, Tear."
"Right now you're thinking about what you saw in the tree when Rhys left you hanging like a trophy fish, and I came to pull you down."
"I saw nothing, Tear. I was half blinded by the pain and the feverish. Anything I might remember is completely unreliable."
"Well said, but we both know that isn't true.
We both know what I look like. When something breaks my concentration, when the glamour fades. Nath planted the tip of his sword in the dirt and allowed the magical facade around him to dissipate. Griffith stood at perfect attention, emotionless as a stone. I have been in service to the blessed nation for 30 years, Nath said. I am the oldest exquisite on the council, and the oldest living elf, but I am far from past my prime. No matter how scarred and calloused my features, the journey towards perfection is too important for me to abandon. While there is strength in my body, I will continue to serve the Guilt Leaf. If I have to mask myself, then that is what I will do. I am not the only one. There are many of us positioned throughout the nation. Years ago, we saw the council was too influenced by the treefolk, and our perfect monarch was too influenced by the council. We who would be drummed out of the nation because of the toll our service took upon us, the scars and burns and broken bodies. We saw that we were more fit than they. Those winnowers you saw work for us, they exist to hunt blighted elves, to kill them and remove their stain from the nation. But under our direction, they also recruit their prey. Many of their eye blights gladly give their eyes to serve their nation one last time. They consent to becoming vinebred, to end their lives as strong and perfect servants of the tribe. Nath strode forward and lowered his horns, thrusting his face into Griffith's. Not all of those magnificent vinebred out there are willing eye-blights. Some are unwilling conscripts taken from the ranks, elves who could aid us in our work, or who pose a threat to it. You have an important choice to make, Griffith. Swear loyal to me and to my peers. Serve us willingly. See yourself revenged on the traitor Rhys, and advance to the highest ranks of the pack. Or serve me as a vine-bred winnower. See yourself revenged on the traitor Rhys, and die when the vines burn through your life force. Griffith held Nath's penetrating stare. I am yours to command, Tessa Nath. Test my loyalty if you must, but you will not find it waning. Excellent. Nath stepped back and resumed his full, robust veneer. Bow your head. Griffith bowed, and Nath touched him lightly on the top of his skull, between the horns. Now rise, Griffith, Dane and commander of the Hemlock Pack. Griffith straightened. Tessin. Come with me now as I review the pack, Nath said. He picked up his long-handled sword and sheathed it. We leave immediately thereafter. Griffith saluted and backed away from the tent flap. Nath carefully positioned his battle headdress around his horns and strode out into the cold evening air. 100 faultless hunters stood in precise formation, backs straight and eyes hungry. As Nath strode past, each in turn bowed his head and sank to one knee, remaining this way until the Tersen reached the end of the ranks. Griffith remained 2 steps behind Nath as the Tersen strode past the cuff-bound pens. Though full of energy and enthusiasm for the coming hunt, the huge, agile canines fell silent and still as Nath approached. The sleek, beautiful animals had been trained to recognize their superiors and show proper respect. Over the years, Nath had learned he could easily gauge a pack of hunters by the quality of its cuff-hounds and its servants. The officers then entered a dense thicket of brush and brambles. They moved easily through the tangle of thorns and ivy, barely disturbing a single leaf, until they broke through into an artificial clearing the elves had cut from the forest. Under the direction of the exquisite leadership, elf druids spent months or sometimes years rearing and tending the vinebred.
Virtually any living thing could be controlled by special magical nettle vines that were the key to the process, taking root in the spine and spreading across the host's entire body until the original creature was completely encased in tough, flexible braids. Tiny thorns along the vines pierced the skin of the host, feeding on its blood, even as the vines returned nutrients and powerful strength-enhancing magic back into the host's body. Once enshrouded, the vine-bred creature was magically bound to obey the commands of all elves. The higher that elf ranked, the stronger his control over his puppet warriors. Vine-bred creatures were not mindless, and they were not the product of necromancy. They were alive, and the most useful, were intelligent and aware of their abilities and place in the Order of Lorwyn. They were also perfect slaves. When given an order, they would carry it out to the best of their ability, sparing no effort, and if something went astray, they would adapt, also to the best of their abilities. It was this threadbare autonomy that made the Vinebred so effective and valuable. They were not just willing to follow orders, they actively wanted to, and often made extraordinary efforts to achieve the goals set for them. The Vinebred that Nath had cobbled together locally were extremely distasteful to his sight, but he knew they were worth having. They had been enchanted quickly, even hastily, and were rough and misshapen compared to the exalted creatures that had just arrived. All vine-bred were undeniably effective in battle. However, their natural strengths enhanced, and their ferocity unmatched. Nath approached the silent line of vine and leaf-encrusted warriors. There were 10 in all. 6 boggarts, one of the only ways the vile little brutes could ever be made useful. 3 Kifkin, and a cast-out female elf, who had been blighted in one of the frequent conflicts that broke out between the noble clans. "Griffith," Nath said. Griffith replied immediately, "Yes, Ter." "How quickly can you march this lot to Kinsbaille?" "An hour or two, Ter. No more than that." "Very well. I want you to take this group and 1/3 of the pack to Kinsbaille now. Wait outside the village. I will take the rest of our hunters and the servant to follow." "Very good, Ter." "Let the Kifkin see you, but do not engage them. Do not even speak to them. Hold your position until we arrive, and then fall in behind us. I do not intend to stop or even slow, but to march straight into the town's center. The Kifkin village will become our new base of operations until the traitor Rhys is captured and publicly executed." He paused, looking down the line of vine-encrusted warriors. "Or, potentially, hunted for sport. With Rhys's death, it will be decades before another Faultless is permitted to apprentice with a treefolk." "As it should be." "Very good. You are dismissed, Dane Griffith. We shall meet again on the edge of Kinsbaille." Griffith moved off, organizing the Vinebred as he walked. Nath turned and marched down the newly arrived contingent of hunters. Rhys would die, Kinsbaille would shake, and the blessed nation would continue on towards perfection. Soon all would be as it should be. Centig found Aisling in the town square, just outside Angus Gowell's general store. Aisling watched the round figure bob through the crowd, and she nudged Bridget. "The Sen is here," she said. "It's about time," the archer replied. Bridget had gone away, but returned a short time later. The townsfolk were gearing up for the annual story festival, and it seemed there wasn't much for warriors to do inside the village. Bridget said that she'd have to wait for her commanding officer to return from patrol before she could get her next assignment, which she thought warily would probably involve scouting out the surrounding forest on foot or in glider to keep an eye out for boggarts.
It wasn't easy being the most celebrated archer in Kinsbaille, she admitted, especially when everyone wanted the folk hero's time, and when part of the appeal of this hero was that she was not the commander, not the general, but just a damn talented Kifkin with a knack for being in the right place at the wrong time.
Hello, hello, the Sen called. So glad to find you two together. I trust the wait was not over long.
Not at all, Aisling said, with a barely perceptible wink to Brigid. Sen Teague presented her with a small coil of gold thread, easily enough to keep the Flamekin solvent for the next leg of her path, wherever it may lead.
The remainder of your fee, he said, and our honored guest suggested it comes with my thanks and congratulations.
You are welcome, Tare. A pleasure doing business with Kinsbaille, as always.
But now that your initial task is complete, Teague said, I wonder if you might be persuaded to accept another.
I'm not sure I'm available, Aisling said. She thought of Rhys in the Sen's office and Marilyn at the inn. The elf would be harder to approach, but Aisling was relatively sure a meal and a flagon of Kifkin ale would loosen Marilyn's tongue about the elemental.
Oh, but I must insist. Kulfanor himself has requested that you attend our storytelling festival. You would be his honored guest and mine.
Aisling smiled. Thank you, Sen. I am glad to accept. And she thought gladder to have an excuse to linger in Kinsbaille.
Splendid! Do come see me if you have any interesting stories to tell.
Sen Teague turned to Brigid.
Brigid, if you are not occupied at present. I am not. And I have something for you as well. We've had reports of a pair of giants lurking outside the village. They have done no harm as of yet, but with the festival approaching, well, we can't have any disruptions during the storytelling now, can we? No, Sen. Would you head out and ascertain what these giants intend? I don't want to make trouble, but if you could find some way of encouraging them to camp elsewhere, I would consider it a personal favor. As you wish, Sen. No violence, the Sen said. Just talk to them. If they give you any trouble, come back here and we'll try a different approach. I understand. Good, good. Well, I'll leave you to it. I look forward to seeing you at the festival, he said to Aisling. And do drop by my office if you need anything. Anything at all.
Sen Teague bobbed off and disappeared into the bustling square. Brigid positioned her bow across her shoulder and said, So, Flamekin, care to join me in bracing a pair of giants? Not right now, Aisling said, but thanks just the same. Suit yourself. I'm sure I'll see you around town. Before Brigid could leave, a familiar voice said, Excuse me? Aisling turned and saw Marilyn. The dark-haired woman's spirits seemed low. Hello again, Aisling said. I hate to trouble you any further, Marilyn said, but have you seen Rhys come out of the Sen's office yet? No, not yet. Well, I had something I wanted to ask him. May I wait with you? We are not waiting for Rhys. Oh, Marilyn smiled knowingly at Aisling. The Flamekin shrugged. I admit, I hope to speak with him. What of it? Maybe I'll wait with you two. You've got my interest piqued, Brigid said. But Marilyn was barely listening. Her dark eyes were fixed on the Sen's office across the square. Aisling watched her stare for a moment. From Marilyn's intense look of concentration, the Flamekin calculated that the Mornsong elf would be more likely to talk to her after they had both spoken to Rhys. Sometimes a pilgrim's progress was slow and deliberate, and waiting was often as much a test as travelling. Aisling pulled the wide brim of her hat down over her face, leaned up against the shop wall beside Marilyn, and settled in. Rhys emerged from the Sen's office and started across the town square with Kulfanor's seed cone held gingerly in both hands. The reinforced glamour hid his broken horns, and while Rhys was grateful for that respite, he couldn't help noticing how Colfanor's parting gift also made it simpler for Rhys to do the old tree's bidding, without the distraction of facing up to his ruination within the Blessed Nation. Rhys took this both as a comfort and proof that the meddling old log would never change. "We know something you don't," 3 fairy voices sang out in perfect harmony, and Ileana, Endry, and Visa buzzed into view over his head. "Hello, children of Una," Rhys said. "Why, hello, Mr. Big Elf. Do you want to hear a secret?" "Do I have a choice?" he asked. "Not really." Rhys continued to walk, he and his plant towering over the diminutive Kifkin crowd. Ileana and her siblings kept pace. "Crowded here in town, isn't it?" she said. Rhys slowed down. "Please get to the point," he said. "Seems like everyone and their brother has come to Kinsbaille for the festival. A fat elf, a flamekin, and lots of elves." Rhys felt a familiar, unpleasant knot form in his gut. He had thought to leave the elf nation behind for a time, but he should have realized the nation would not let him go, and not if Nath was still leading the Guilt Leaf. "And 2 brothers, 2 big brothers," Ileana continued. Rhys slowed down. A creeping suspicion formed in the back of his mind. "Giants," Ileana concluded. 2 giants camped right outside the gates." Rhys nodded as he kept walking. "Have they been causing trouble?" "Not at all, but trouble will find them soon anyway. The Sen does not like the giants so close. He sent the archer to shoo them away." "What?" Rhys asked. "When?" "Moments ago. She's on her way there now. You can catch her before she gets there if you run." Rhys paused just long enough to imagine the nightmare that would ensue if the Kifkin tried to drive the giants away by force. "Thank you," he said. "For once I am grateful you see so much and talk so often." Rhys moved swiftly through the crowds, his progress facilitated by the fact that every Kifkin hurried to get out of his way. Giggling merrily, the trio buzzed and flitted overhead, keeping pace with Rhys as he picked his way through the square. "Rhys!" The elf turned towards the sound of his name and saw Aisling, Bridget, and Marilyn waving to him from in front of the general store. He continued heading directly for the gates as the 3 moved to intercept him. "How did the meeting with your mentor go?" Aisling asked. Rhys said, "It was brief. I've been given a task to perform. My best chance of success is to go and do it right now." "But the mean elves are coming," Visa said, "and there are a lot of them." Marilyn's face darkened. "Your former pack, Tear?" Rhys nodded. "I would like to come with you, please." "What? Of course not. Absolutely not." "These elves that are coming," Marilyn mused. "They're coming in force?" "Big force," Ileana said. "Big, big force. The biggest." "So they'll have rangers and archers," Marilyn confirmed.
"Yes," Rhys said.
"And servin and cuffhounds too, I suppose?"
Yes, Rhys snapped. "What is the point?"
"Cuffhounds that have been following your scent for days and mine along with it. Cuffhounds that will lead whoever it is that is after you straight to me when they can't find you in Kinsbaille. I would prefer not to be here when that happens. They'll find us one way or the other. I think our chances are better if we're together. Don't you?"
Rhys opened his mouth. He was unable to come up with a suitable rejoinder, so he closed it again. "Very well," he said, "but you must understand, you are no longer under my protection. I cannot see your safety as I did before."
"I expect it won't be necessary. Not to the degree it was."
"You'll change your mind when the fairies start again."
"Oh, I'm not worried about them. I think I'm getting the hang of dealing with their kind." "If you need to get out of here quickly," Aisling said, "I know a Merrow who can ferry you."
Rhys nodded. "Thank you." Bridget glanced back at Kinsbaille for a moment.
"I have to move some giants first, but my scent follows your trail almost as much as Marilyn's," she said. If elves are coming, I should leave as well.
We can discuss the giants later. We must go now.
As the group moved out of the square, the fairies spun in happy circles over their heads. Together again! Ileana cried. Friends forever! Except for that fat elf. She's fat.
The dark-haired woman smiled patiently.
Is it bad luck, she said to no one in particular, to drown a fairy in the river? Yes, Ileana said, especially helpful fairies like us. But only if you actually manage to do it. Visa flexed her sharp fingers. Which you never will. Just try it, Fatty.